Good afternoon, all. I hope you're keeping well. So this is the Wealth Creation Show, how to accelerate your wealth in 2022. And we've got Jim demonstrating exactly this, sitting in Jamaica with a nice tan at the moment. Morning, Jim, which it will be morning for you, isn't it?
That was weird when you said good afternoon, because it's only 7:30 here. we just got up. Am I just gonna do a round robin again and show you where
God.
it is? In the background there, that's the beach. There's no Fife Coastal Pass here, by the way. There's maybe a Jamaican Coastal Pass. That's the swimming pool. Everybody's and there's all the people put their towels on the chairs, and they're not even here. Aye, so shame on them. And that's it really. There's hillside. There's a royal plantation. Apparently, Adam Sandler and all that stayed there before, and the celebrities use it as a place to go to next door at the thing. And I'm thinking, wait a minute, why am I not there? I was kind of thinking that to myself. Well, when he was going past, I was like, whoa, wait a minute, why am I here? Why am I not next door? Because it's not for the fact that I can't afford it. It's like, but I should be next door. This is the right. Anyway, but that's the journey you take, and that's the I suppose that's the price I've paid, the investment I've made in myself, and everything I've done over the years in order to get where I am so far. So we're talking about my journey, and we're talking about, last week, we talked about some difficult subjects last week, and my primary school year. So just to recap on what everybody, for people watching and people listening in, if you've not heard the first episode, we did talk about my primary school years, and I was like, what the hell has that got to do with wealth? That's what you'd be asking yourself, and creating and how to make your first million. But the reality was, it's all that mindset. It's held me back from these times, and growing up. And I'm trying to explain what's happened, but I'm also trying to explain for somebody it was that age, how for me, if I'd looked back and to help myself, how I could have resolved some of these situations. So it's learning from, I suppose it's learning from your mistakes, or learning from the things that have happened to you in order to help you move forward. So we talked about these, and you can listen to them all to your heart's content. It's in the Wealth Creation Show playlist on the YouTube channel. It's on the previous playlists on here as well, on Facebook if you're watching. If you're on Twitter, you need to go to the link or wherever it is. And you can also go to our podcast page on Anchor as well, and it's on there as well as Spotify and stuff like that. So you can listen in on the podcast. It's on our website as well, last week's one, so you'll find it in there in the list of the blogs and vlogs.
But yeah, so, basically what this is this morning for you, afternoon for us, is the Wealth Creation Show, and it's more coming from an angle really of a diary of a property investor. And this diary of a property
investor, how I made my first million. We'll get to that. I didn't realise I'd made my first million, by the way, when I finally left my job, which we'll cover at some point in time. It was only a couple of months back when I actually looked over the financial situation. I thought, geez, I actually made my first million. And I didn't talk about million as in I got £1 million of property. I meant net worth million. It was about 1.2 million actually.
I guess one of the things, and you touched on it a little bit there, Jim, in regards to starting right at primary school, and you're talking through all of your ages, and it's one of those things that I remember growing up. My mum always used to say to me, give me the boy till he's 10 and I'll show you the man. And it's kind of true, isn't it? Because we get all of these things become inherent in us when we're children, and we believe that that's the things we need to do and how we need to think and how we need to act. And then a situation will happen that throws that out a little bit. But actually, we're not always necessarily equipped to move forward with it, are we? So it's quite good that you're sharing this part of your journey so that you can talk about that so others can learn from it.
Yeah. The one programme I loved was 7 Up on the television, where it talked about the children as they grew up, and every 7 years it revisited the children. Now, it's interesting that your mum said that about giving a boy till he's 10 and I'll show you the man. It's actually 19 or thereabouts. And then that's you hardwired for the rest of your life, and your beliefs and your understandings of how everything works. And you have to align to these beliefs. So if you end up by the time you're 19 of being a giver and a server, you will be a giver and server for the rest of your life. And if you try to go against that, then it will create torment in your life forever until you align with your proper beliefs. Interestingly enough, some of the things I didn't discuss last week, I wanted to recap on to let people understand where I was coming from and going into the high school years. Because remember, this is all baggage that you've accumulated. So everything that I got last week, I'd never really offloaded as a child because there was nobody there to actually talk to or mentor or understand me at all. And you know how people have some people are lucky. You know, the classic example is my grandfather or my grandmother has always been my cheerleader. My mum or my dad has always been my cheerleader. It's always somebody I've been able to talk to and talk me through the process. I never really had that. I never had these relationships. We're all quite individual people. It's almost like, you know, once you've left the nest, that's it. Bye bye. That's kind of how our family works. And Elaine's family doesn't work like that at all. They all keep in touch with each other, they're all social, and they all get together and all the rest of it. So it's it's two different worlds. That's why marriage is actually quite difficult, because one understanding of how you interact with your children and the other person's understanding of how you interact with your children clash with each other. So you have to understand each other in order to move forward in a marriage, or technically, usually what happens is you break up and go your separate ways because you can't understand each other. It's a true occasion about men are from Mars and women are from Venus. And what men need to do is learn to speak Venusian. And what women need to do is learn to speak Martian. And that's key here in relationships. But here's some of the things that actually I didn't cover last week. This is quite a difficult one. I know my mum didn't realise what she'd said to me when I was really young, but she actually explained to me it was a mistake. That's a hard thing to understand when you're young.
Well, that's a powerful statement, eh?
Yeah, it's like, and I know what she meant now, because it's like, well, you weren't planned. It's like, because remember, there was 3 before me, and then there was a 2-year gap, and then all of a sudden I appeared. But then I always believed in my mind, no matter what she thought she'd told me at the time, that I was a mistake. It was almost like rejection. And rejection's a hard thing to comprehend, and nobody wants to be rejected. It's fundamental core. Everybody wants to be loved in some shape or form. And that's why people will do destructive things and still stay with someone, because they believe it, they fundamentally love them, even though they're abusive towards them.
And do you think that some of that is about almost you as the wounded party when you were a child and carried that baggage through? Do you feel that actually maybe sometimes that's why disruption's there? It's almost like an attention thing. Do you think it's that, or do you think it's something else?
Of course it is. And then I had my grandfather always tell me I was lazy because I never did anything he wanted me to do. You know, it's like, go and do this and go and do that. And just because I didn't want to do it at the time, I mean, I would have done it later on, but because I didn't want to do it at the time, it was like, oh, you're born lazy, you're born idle. So that's all I ever heard from one of my grandfathers, you know, was you're born lazy, you're born idle, and then the mistake. And then you can see how that all compounds in a child's mind. There was another thing as well, which I maybe realised. I don't know if it's something to do with the additives in food, but I don't know if anybody else out there had this similar feeling, but I could never sit still. I genuinely, see, when I went to a cinema, I couldn't sit still in a cinema. My legs actually fizzed. Honestly, my legs fizzed. It's like they were on fire all the time. And I don't know if that's an ADHD thing, but remember, ADHD is apparently a symptom of something else, and this is something I'm actually investigating now, if that is the case or not. But so not being able to sit still and, you know, fidgeting all the time and moving about all the time. I don't know if that's anything to do with food addicts or anything like that. But again, it's another thing which I couldn't do. So, you know, you can imagine what it was like in class for a teacher, trying to you know, manage that, and that's just one of me. You know, there's going to be other people out there like that.
When you talk about your legs fizzing and everything, do you find that your brain was fizzing as well, Jam? I mean, I work with you, and so I kind of know some of your traits, and you are a thinker, aren't you? And you think, constant thinker. Do you think that that's followed you through life, or?
Yeah. I mean, how many people get up in the middle of the night and actually do repetitive thinking all the time? Almost like a Rain Man incident, like 2 and 2, 4, 2 and 2, 4, 2 and 2, 4, 2 and 2, 4 in your mind. And it's like, my God, I'm just going to have to go up and watch the television and drink a cup of tea or something like that to actually take my mind off of this, because it gets repetitive thinking in your mind. Or if you get something in your mind, it just goes over and over and over and over. And a lot of people say, well, why do you not just switch off? And it's like, you can't. It's to the point sometimes where it's unbearable. So you have to do something completely different. So it could be a strength, because it's maybe a dogged determination, and that's maybe your mind working it through. But it can actually be a curse as well. Incidentally, if you need to dream, by the way, anybody that doesn't want their dreams, I'll take my glasses off because they're getting darker. Anybody that doesn't want dreams, you need to dream. You need to, because your dream is your psyche actually working out and getting all the bad stuff out, or the good stuff. So the horrific dreams that you have is to a degree a blessing, because your mind's working it all out and getting it all off all this baggage off your mind before you actually wake up. So, it is, embrace it. The fact that you're dreaming is a good thing. It's when you stop dreaming, that's when you have to be concerned, because then you're working out your mind during the day and the times where you're more aware of what's going on. You're not letting it settle. This is all the things as well as, do you know you're meant to let children sleep in? They're hardwired. They're rewiring their brain when they're sleeping in the morning. These are all things you find out from all the masters of their field. The psycholists, the all these different people. They actually know what they're doing and they know what they're talking about, and it's all that distilled information. It's in books, it's in podcasts, but these are all things. And for me, it's like I was told, "You're up, right? Get up, get up, get up, get up." So when you think about that as well, you're not allowed time to rewire your brain. Your brain's not allowed, because that's what it's doing. It's shutting down, and it's actually switching everything else off, and it's working on rewiring and reprogramming and actually getting all your shit out, so you can start the day clean.
But as a child then, Jim, were you easy to go to bed? Or, I mean, certainly in my house, I know what we were like. My mum and dad were really strict. My dad, ex-military, policeman, 3 daughters. There was kind of iron rod kind of rulings going on in our house, and we were literally always in bed by 7:30 every single evening. We were allowed to maybe sit for half an hour and read or something, but then it literally was lights out at 8, and you were sleeping till 7:30 again the next morning. So you were almost like 12 hours a day. And sometimes you weren't ready for going to bed, but there was no option with that. It's, when you were asked or told, as it turned out, you had to go. Were you an early bedder as well, or were you wired that you didn't sleep well at night as well?
Maybe you put me to my bed, but I'm not going to sleep. And that's probably one of the issues that I had to resolve as well. Later on, I'll talk about that and how I managed that situation. But then what happened out of that is that's when you got out to high school, and it's like, oh my God, here we come. All the baggage is coming with me. That's where the drink started. And it's like, what? What, 12-year-old? It's like, that was the type of things you got involved at high school. That's the things that we got involved. And then there was the drugs and the girls and the gambling and the smoking and the shooting. It's like, it just started to take its course. But I think I'm sure that's a product and a symptom of everything that came before. It was never resolved. I'm convinced of that, when you work it through.
Do you feel that you've maybe, in the way you describe that, Jim, and I only know this because of my life's history and my family and things that we've experienced, but would you say you kind of had a bit of an addictive personality then?
That's an understatement. Yeah, I think addictive personality is again a symptom of something that's not resolved in your life. You become addictive to most situations. I mean, you just trade. I've done a podcast with the guys from Gamblers Anonymous, and it's on our channel. And I did it in my Sunday Swap shows. And they came on. They were anonymous, but they talked about addictions. And funny enough, before we started, I was actually talking to John, and I said to him, I'm no longer an addictive gambler, which I was, and I suppose you could still say I am a addictive gambler, but I just don't gamble. But he says, I'm quite addicted to my work. And he says, well, funny enough, Jim, we just trade one addiction for another until the full issue is resolved.
Mm-hmm.
I thought, boy, was that a statement in itself? Because it's true. All we're doing is trading one addiction for another, but we're not actually dealing with the actual situation at hand. So for people out there that have their addictive personalities and they're addicted to it, it's not that, it's the problem. It's the issue is there's something you've not resolved in your life, and that's why you're turning to gambling, and you're turning to maybe drinking, and you're turning to everything else, in order to suppress that. But you're
It's
not.
like a camouflage, isn't it?
Yeah, by suppressing it every single time, you're just making it worse. So it's never going to allow you to move on. It's never going to fulfill you, and you'll still lead that. For some people, it's that miserable life, and I'll be honest and say that's why some people choose an early exit, because they don't understand themselves, and they don't understand what's happened to themselves throughout that process. So nobody's helped them, and they don't seek help. They've been brought up by me. It's to like, you just man up and get on with it. It's like guys didn't cry, guys didn't show their emotions. It's like,
don't be a sissy. Remember that statement you spoke about? Yeah.
You don't. You're taught that that's not what men do. Men just go out and work. I often say to people in a joking way, but it's kind of true, is most men lead quiet lives of desperation.
And what do you mean by that?
Well, they suppress everything. They push everything down. They never deal with it. And every time something happens in their life, they just think they've got to suck it up. And there's only, and I suppose when you think about it, if you've got a Hoover and the Hoover keeps continually sucking everything up, at some point in time that Hoover's going to blow up.
Yeah.
Or it's going to pack up. That's the end of it. The Hoover's going to break down and it's never coming back. And we know what that means.
Yeah, that's never a good position. I mean, actually, it's a good place to just maybe take a quick pause there, Jim. So we've got a couple of hellos to say. So Jack McIntosh, he's saying hello, and he's saying, I am rich, ? Rich with good friends and memories. And that's a blessing place to be. Andrea says good morning, but then she also says here, Jim, which I think is quite a good one, and it talks about what you're saying. Do you think there is a difference between needing to make changes that will benefit you in all ways and wanting to make those changes?
Well, want is a desire. Need is essential.
Yeah.
So people, I'll be, again, I keep saying I'll be honest, but I'm always understanding. I always shoot from the hip. And there's like, you get what you see in the tin with me. That's it. You'll know that yourself, Perrie.
I do. I experience that daily, Jim.
And I generally just say it and I just get on with it and I put it out there. And if anybody wants to take on board my opinion, fair enough. But remember, it's only an opinion. Keith Cunningham used to say that to me. Now, Keith Cunningham is Rich Dad. That's who the book was written about. He was in business with Robert Kiyosaki about Rich Dad Poor Dad. Something happened to Keith Cunningham at the time, and he was no longer able to go along with the whole, before it all started with Rich Dad Poor Dad network. But it was primarily about Keith Cunningham. But when I spoke to Keith Cunningham, he said, hey Jim, what I'm saying right now is only my opinion. You don't need to believe it. It's entirely up to you. But I'm just putting it out there to stimulate thought and stimulate debate about whether it would help you move forward. But for some people, definitely, there's always something will need to change in their lives. If you want to make a change in your life, guess what? You've got to change some things in your life. And often people work with the principle of, I'll just keep doing the same thing. But I tell you what, I'm hoping to expect a different result. That's not going to happen.
No, but I think that we often speak about this, and when you talk about the fact that you speak quite straight as a die, that works for me. I like that, and I can work along with that because I understand where you're coming from on those things, and it's more about us is to generate thought and conversation and another way, potentially, not necessarily thinking, but just another view of the scenario. But when you talk about change there, for people who have been programmed, which is what you started saying, Jim, at the beginning of episode 1 and then into episode 2, when you've been programmed a certain way, change is quite scary, isn't it? And change is a big thing to drive you forward, and to adapt and take on board, because there's part of you that's just had this constant acceptance of, this is life, this is what I'm supposed to do, this is how I'm supposed to act and how I'm supposed to behave, even whether you believe that it is accurate or not. And then changing that, actually, that's the scary bit, isn't it? How do you encourage that? How do you encourage someone to take that on, Jim? Because I mean, you've obviously had to do that.
This is why people stay with abusive partners. When everybody else is telling them round about them to leave them, they still stay with them because they're more afraid of what might happen once they've left. They don't, unless you see, now this is typical in sales, but this is because of psychology, and this is how psychology works. Unless there's a 30% perceived benefit or more from making a change, you will never do it. That's why most people just stick with the same bank and the same bank account, because they don't see the 30% difference in change. It's only until something happens dramatically that you'll ever change doing anything you want to do. But for every single person that's made that change, you usually walk away and say, thank God I made that change. So, but it's taking that leap of faith in yourself. But because most people are so driven down, and they're so undervalued and underconfident and feel worthless, remember, it's all up here. It's your chimp that's doing it to you. Nothing else. It's your emotional responses to everything. It does that to yourself and then reinforces it. Because of that, and then everything round about you, you work towards justifying that as your position and that is your lot in life, and you're not worth anything else. I've seen it so many times in so many people. I see so much potential in them, and I see where they can go and where they can be and how they can do things. But I have more belief in them than they do have in themselves. You've probably seen me do that a lot of times with people who have been with us.
Totally.
And I always say that I do say that to some people when I'm in a one-to-one. It's like, I have more belief in you than you do yourself. Why is that? And try to get them to get to the bottom of that. So I'm asking them that question, not by challenging them and trying to put them down. I'm asking them to ask themselves, ask their wee chimp, the emotional side of their brain, why is that the case? And then the chimp goes to the human part and goes, could you give me some logic to back that up? And then that's how the brain works, from the emotional state to the emotional state always gets it first, and then the logical state actually processes that and says, okay, I'm going to justify, and I'm going to find out facts and figures to justify that principle. So coming back to my earlier years in the high school, like, I had none of that knowledge, and that's why it's so important that we have people that can mentor the younger generation now and help the younger generation work through their issues and their problems. We all look back, and when people say, oh, I'm depressed, I'll be honest, I used to say that to my mum all the time. I used to bang my head against the wall physically, and I really mean bang my head as in hurting myself, and actually say, I wish I was dead. And that was at a young age. That's crazy for somebody like me to think that. And I don't mean crazy as in the crazy word. It's just illogical thinking. But what baggage must you be carrying with yourself, the trauma, in order to think like that and think, I just want rid of this. I want out of this. I don't want to be here any longer. And that's generally why most people become, anorexic. And why? I even went through self-harming and cutting myself. It's like, that's another thing I forgot about completely. It's like just taking a razor blade and slicing my arm. It's like, what's all that about? But I know what it's about. It comes back to, even though you're being self-destructive towards yourself, you're still in control of what's happening. And it's the control that you crave, because you don't have control anywhere else in your life. So even if it's a self-destructive, a child or anybody, an adult, will do that because it gives them control at that point in time, and that's what they need in their life. So even though it's harmful, they'll continue to do it. That's why people do anything. And then also it goes in line with that's why people will be, if they're to be loved and accepted, that's why they'll get in with the wrong crowd, because that crowd will love and accept them for it.
So when you went to high school then, were in that journey, did you get involved with the wrong crowd, or were you the wrong crowd?
No, yeah, well, high school was it was like the Jets and the Sharks, wasn't it? It was like West Side Story. You had to be in with the right. You had to fit in with the right group of people, and the group of people I fitted in with were the misfits, because essentially, I was a misfit. That I didn't fit into the educational system. I wasn't a primary candidate. They were trying to shoehorn me into a round peg into a square box. And they were trying to force me into that, but the reality is, you won't be able to force somebody like me because I will not accept it, and that's why people rebel against the system. And I go back to saying that I said it last night. The school system is designed to produce worker ants. It's there for one reason: to get you to be employable and actually work for the rest of your life, or to do something. And it's not there to teach you to be self-employed. It's not there to teach you to run your own business. It's very rare that system's there to do that. They just want you, because the mass amount of people will do that. 95% of the people that go through the school system will actually work for someone else. The other 5% will run their own business and be wealthy and rich as a result. That's always been the case, and it always will be the case. And you can't change that. You can just give people the tools and the necessary information and the advice and support in order to get them to the group that they want to be in. For some people, they're happy for the rest of their life doing what they're doing. Hey, if it makes you happy and everyone else is happy around about you as a result of you doing what you're doing, fantastic. But the day your happiness is at the expense of someone else or some other people, that's a problem.
Yeah. And actually something you see quite frequently in life with people, isn't it? Where actually their happiness is dependent on a third party rather than that inner peace and happiness that they can create from themselves.
Of course it is. Of course it is. You see the classic example today where people say, I'm going to stop drinking for my kids. As soon as they become wee buggers and they get out of control, it's like, give me the booze. That's what happens. I'm going to stop drinking for you, my dear. As soon as he falls out with her, straight back to the bottle. He's not doing it for him. He's doing it for everybody else but himself. Do yourself a favour if you're listening out there. Do it for yourself. Only with you getting you right can you get everybody else right. If you don't love yourself, you're not going to learn to love anybody else round about you.
And that's quite a big thing to face up to, Jim, isn't it?
It is. But again, it's been self-aware, and it's that continuous journey of understanding yourself and reading the right books and associating with the right people and the people that will take you in the right direction, and listening to the right podcast. I mean, I keep going on, and I should be getting paid for this, but it's like Diary of a CEO with Steve Bartlett. He gets all of the best people on, and the successful people in their field, and it's a wealth of information at your fingertip for free. All you need to do is watch a couple of adverts now and again, or skip them when it comes up time. It's like, why would you not plug into that? And I know why you wouldn't plug into that, because for some people, it's not their point of readiness. They're not at that point. They're not at that point in their life where they feel they need to make a change. They think that they've either arrived or they're still working towards that journey. But the sooner you can get that information and get that advice and support, the quicker you can get to your destination. And that's how I looked at property investment. It was like when I knew where I was going in property investment, I just like, get out of my way, everybody, get out of my way, because I know that road is right in front of me, right here, and every single thing that's going to come in front of me right now at this point in time is going to get in my way. So just get out of my way. Let me do my thing. I know what to do. I know how to get there. Everybody get out of my way. That's what I did every single time, because I knew where I was going. I knew what I wanted to achieve. And I worked towards it as a result. And I knew what I needed to do. So I just broke it all down into smaller steps in order to get where I wanted to go. The other thing, hey, guess what happened again? another attempt at somebody to abuse me. It's like, what? If I just got the luck of this again, it's like, next thing I'm in somebody's car after they're supposedly giving me a run home, and he's taking me a whole different route and talking inappropriately to me when I was like 14 years old. What's, if you're that type of person, for God's sake, do yourself a favour and go and get some help, because that's not what you should be doing. But, that was another time. So, again, that's another thing, a baggage I had to cope with. I didn't tell anybody these things. All these things were just suppressed till later on. Till about 20 or 30 years later on, then it starts to come out. So is it no surprise that when the stimulants came along, like the drink, like the potential drugs, like the gambling, like the smoking,
all the feel-good things.
Yeah, all the things that give you the initial hit, give you the initial hype, and people say, "Geez, you were 12 years old." It's like I was smoking at 11. I tried it when I was 7, and I even tried it at 9. I think I actually maybe continued at 9 years old up to about 19 or 20. But that was that, and I do remember Mary Ferguson, now Mary Walker. I remember Mary challenging him on the bus and saying, why are you smoking? Why do you like, what is it about that? And I had to convince her that I liked it when I didn't.
And you didn't really.
It's because it gave me some sort of control, and also it made me feel like I was an adult and I was in charge. That's why I did it. That was the only reason.
And that whole feeling of making you feel like an adult and in charge, is that maybe because of those 2 bad experiences you had, one that you told last week and obviously what you've just shared just now, because they were adults and in your mind they were the controlling person? Is that what made you think that? Or
I think it's just a combination of everything. When you get to that point and you've got all that baggage where you just want to get rid of it, and any opportunity to do anything which will actually numb that experience and that emotional and suppress it, you'll actually go to. It's, people say drinking is a disease. It's a disease. Like Marx always said, taken from Bob Proctor, if anybody knows Bob Proctor's teachings, Bob Proctor used to say every single time, nothing is ever a disease, it's a disease. And if you've got a drinking problem or you've got a gambling problem, it's because you've got dis-ease and something else in your life that you need to resolve in order to stop having to take that stimulant. Because gambling's a stimulant. It's not about winning. It's the thrill that you're seeking. I mean, I went to Gamblers Anonymous when I was probably about 18, and I heard their stories of people that had lost everything, lost their taxi company. The guy that stood on the end of the Dundee Pier, put a gun to his head, pulled the trigger. It never went off. He fell down onto the sand, and he realised it must be a sign. I need to change. And God, it never went off. And then the other person that lost their whole taxi business in the casinos, and even though the casinos were trying to stop this person getting in, they were wearing disguises, they were sneaking in the back door, and it's all these different things. And I thought, and once I'd been to see them, it's like, God, I am never going to do this ever again. That kind of these experiences, and see how their trauma and their stories actually helped me change for the better. So I basically never did that. But then, as I said, one addiction stops and another one starts. Because you need to replace it with something, because you've not resolved the initial issue. You've not resolved the thing in your life that actually needs to be resolved. And you have to dig deep to find that out. Because a lot of people will say, well, what is it then? And it's a lot of soul searching. It's a lot of thinking. It's just a lot of thinking it through. And one day it'll maybe pop into your head and think, yeah, that's probably what it is. But it's maybe resolving all these wee little things, all these wee little things that lead to that event that actually happens. The gambling was a product of everything that's happened. The smoking was definitely a product of everything that's happened. The drink, yeah, I think most of the kids did this. I mean, we used to go to house parties all the time, from 12 years old, 13 year old. I mean, I had a brother that was 2 years older than me. So when he was going, guess where I was going?
Yeah, we're tagging along.
Yeah, every single time. He used to try and get rid of him all the time, but always tagged along. And to a degree, Dave was a really good influence in my life as well, but he's also a bad influence in my life as well as the people round about you. This is why you will be in the next 5 years where you'll be by the people you associate with and the books you read. And if you associate with the wrong people, and just think about that right now, if you're going through challenging times and you've got problems in your life and you've got drink and drugs and possibly alcohol and gambling and everything else that's going on, your relationships aren't good, check out all the friends that you're actually associating with. You'll probably find they're exactly the same. Misery loves company. Remember that.
Yeah, it's
Keep
a bit
away
of
from
that
these people.
as well. It is a bit like that, but I think there's also an element of where, as human beings, because we've done it as children, and I've seen some things over the weekend where it was like children were copying what adults were doing, and we constantly mirror, don't we? We mirror what we see every day and what we mix with every day, and then that's what happens. If you're seeing that and you're mirroring it, then you become it, don't you? And it's so easy to do that.
I've seen it so many times in relationships where a friend would come to me and say, and I would say to them, well, I think the best way forward is probably speak to Relate Scotland, which is in Kirkcaldy. If you phone them up, it's free advice and free counselling. It can be you, it can be for your partner as well. It's not about getting you back together, it's about moving you forward in the right direction. If it means you go your separate ways, it does, but it will be amicable and it'll all be for nothing. It'll all be free if you want it to be free, and it won't cost you a fortune. The lawyers will bleed you dry. So that's what I say to them. And then, the next thing comes out their mouth is, my friends at work say this, and it's completely opposite. And my first question to them is, are your friends at work got relationships? Oh no, they're all divorced. There's a surprise.
Yeah. That's
because
the thing,
all they can do is teach you the path that they followed. They can't. If they were able to get you back together or able to resolve the situation for you, they wouldn't be divorced and they wouldn't be separated. So, love them to bits, but you've got to remember, if that's not the advice you should be taking, don't take their advice. Just because they say it, it's only their opinion. These are, again, all things that you learn throughout your life, and throughout the books you read, the podcasts you listen to, the people you associate with, and become wiser in your whole journey. Plus the fact you can impart that onto your children. All this learning, this information that you have, it could be a huge resource for your children. Why do you think I'm doing this show? Why do you think I'm recording all this? Why do you think this is all going to be timeless content? My children will look back, possibly my grandchildren will look back, my great-grandchildren will look back. They all listen to this as well. They might be a lot wiser, but they'll realise and understand if any of them's got challenges, they'll see this, they'll listen to this, and they'll see where it was and what it was like for me. So if I can help them later on, I mean, they're not even born yet, and possibly I might be here helping them right now by what I'm saying. And the people round about me.
In regards to that then, do you feel that by speaking out and by sharing, actually it's been part of your healing journey as well?
Of course. We always used to say, when I first met Elaine, right, I'll tell you the story later on about how I met Elaine. You're never going to believe this, but I'll tell you later on, because that's the next episode. But when I first met Elaine, I used to say to Elaine, a problem shared is a problem halved, because she never wanted to tell me anything. And it was one of the things that we actually bonded with the fact that we used to talk to each other about our own situations, about what we were going through and stuff like that. And it generally was a problem shared is a problem halved, because you're actually, somebody else is helping you. Now, I actually, funny enough, I actually read this morning in the chimp paradox, and the fact that the chimp is there to let you vent. It's the emotional side. You have to let the chimp out the box for that period of time. You have to let the chimp, what we call, exercise. You have to let that happen. I have a good friend and potentially mentor as well, I think as well, Ian. Ian is brilliant at that, but then he's read the chimp paradox. So he understands that and understands that process. Ian is a fantastic listener, and helping me work things out, helping me understand the process. If I didn't, everybody should have an Ian in their life, I'll tell you. Because it's somebody that's there for you all the time when you need them. Even through the dark times, they'll still be there. They'll still listen to you. They'll still engage with you. They'll still help and support you. So everybody should have an Ian. I'll guarantee you that. But it's essential. You've got to work it through in your mind and exercising your chimp, your emotional side, and getting out and just just venting your frustration. You don't need to act on it. You just need to vent it and let it exercise. And then if you think, yeah, your human side kicks in and says, no, we shouldn't be doing anything about this. You've said your bit, get back in your box, and I'll take it forward from here. Or even putting timelines on things. You know, it's like, right, okay, we'll spend the next couple of weeks trying to resolve this issue in your work or your job or anything like that. We'll spend this next couple of weeks trying to resolve this issue. If we've not resolved it by this point in time, it's gone, dead in the water, we're moving on. So you don't carry this with you. And then that's how people get overloaded every single time. So again, these are all things that you can learn at a younger age, hopefully now. It would probably benefit you into your later years, and it'll make you more wiser, more able to help other people. Nobody pays me to sell their house. People pay me to solve a problem, and it may so happen that they sell the house in the process, but a lot of the times it's another issue as well. I need to help them resolve, and they don't know it yet. But once I sit down with them and understand where they are, and I understand where they're going and how they want to get there, I can then talk them through the process. So let's say I'm what is it called? The chimp listener. that's kind of what is it? I don't know, sure, but the chimp whisperer.
Yeah.
That's it's all about listening to people's journeys, listening to people's stories, and helping them resolve it, but helping them resolve their issue, not telling them what to do.
I think in those environments,
they have to do it for themselves.
They do, but I think when you're in that situation, as you say, and you've got all that fizz and noise going on in your mind, actually being able to share that with someone who's going to take it on board, not necessarily going to judge anything, but then will actually be able to guide you, even if their guidance is not taking you in the route that potentially your brain might have decided. You've still got all of that noise out of your head, haven't you? So you're creating a bit of space where you can then process maybe a resolution.
Of course. Remember, your mind's only got so much capacity in it. If you keep overloading it and you're not able to put anything into the back of your mind, you know, because that's my dad actually said this quite well. He says, I remember him saying it years and years ago. This is how many years ago. He says, your mind's like a tape recorder. He says, what happens is, or for anybody else, it's like a hard disk. Your mind's like a hard disk. What happens is, because I used to say, we used to think about things. And then you just go, oh, I've not really got the answer. And then all of a sudden, out of the blue, 3 days later, you go, it was Johannesburg. And folk go, what? And you go, oh, the answer to that question 3 days ago about the place in Africa. And they're going, we've forgotten all about it. But your mind's like that. It goes away and finds the answer from the hard disk, because all that information is dumped into your hard disk in your mind or your tape recorder, and then it winds it back till it comes to that point and says, oh, I've got the answer to that. There's a lot of sense in actually what we call is taking a problem, putting it in the box on your table. Have the wee box on your table and writing down the problem, putting it in the box, and 3 days later taking that problem back out, and more than likely you've got the solution to it, even though you didn't have the solution to it at that time. That's a well-known process of actually being solution orientated.
Yeah,
As the box process.
I have to say that I go through that quite frequently just now with the fog brain. But it's true, even as a child growing up, my mum always just say to me, oh, I can't remember what individual, never mind, it'll come back to me. And I guess it's the same kind of thing that you're explaining there, isn't it?
Yeah. So these are all things that will help you through your journey. So again, coming back to the school, as the baggage and all the rest of it happened, there's another couple of things that really made a fundamental impact on me at school as well. I remember the French exchange student actually taking me out the French class, pinning me up against the wall and threatening me when I was 13 years old. How great is that? And then my head, and these are all the experiences that I never told anybody, because, you know, the first thing that happens is when you go home, your mum and dad go straight away and assume that you were in the wrong, because they always believe the teacher. But on this occasion, you shouldn't have done it. I even remember the head of English when I was probably in 4th year, 5th year, took me out of the class, had a discussion with me about my situation. Now remember, I'm off the rails by this point in time, and explaining to me how I was similar to the dog shite that he scrapes off his shoe after walking his dog in the morning. So while I'm looking for support and help, this is what the head of the English department is doing to me at the same time. Do you think that's going to make it better or worse?
Well, obviously it's going to make it worse, but actually what it then does, and this is where it breaks down for people, Jim, isn't it? Because then actually you're a young teen, and at that point you think, well, what's the point in speaking to an adult? What's the point in speaking to a grown-up? What's the point in speaking out and getting help? Because no one's helping me, no one's listening. And then that's where you start bottling it up, and then you go for those other vices, don't you? Because it helps you forget about all those other things that no one else grown up seems to want to help with.
That's true, and that's why you get caught in the how am I going to suppress this? Well, it's going to be drink, it's going to be drugs, it's going to be gambling, it's going to be truanting. That's why I started to truant. I just thought, what's the point of being at school? So I just used to tick it all the time. I used to stay off school. I used to go in for registration in the morning, and then I just used to walk home from there. I used to go way down the dam, or sometimes we wouldn't even go. We just went down to the golf club. I used to see my friends, Grant and Ewan, walking over the bridge at Scooney, and then immediately go, oh, we're going to the golf club today. You getting in the bus, pal? No, we're going to the golf club. And then the deputy director driving past us and saying, where are you boys going? Oh, we're going to find Ewan's school bag. Mind and report to me when you come in from the late bus then. And it's like, we just go to the golf club. So, but at that point, I just thought, I don't care anymore. It's like, nobody's bothered. Nobody wants to help you at this point in time. Everybody just wants to put you down. Everybody just sees you as disruptive. You don't fit into the system. They just want you to fit in a square peg and a round peg into a square hole. So why should I bother even more? So I think everybody's probably realised that school was never the formative years for me. But wait till you find out next week what happened. Like, wow, it's like a completely different thing. How on earth could somebody go from school to then be the top student 3 years in a row at college? How is that possible? After failing miserably in the same subject at college, he sat at college and became the top student 3 years in a row, and failing it miserably at school. What does that say about the school system?
Yeah, and that's the thing, isn't it? It's such a regimental thing, and as you say, it's all about mass numbers as well. So, you know, in those days there was maybe between 25 and 30 children in a class, so it's like you focus on the majority, and then the minority kind of get ignored, don't they, and left behind because they don't fit to everything else.
This is why it was important when the teachers used to come to us about our children and say, oh well, Tony's not doing that well in accountancy, so rather than have her hit the advanced higher accountancy, we're going to get her to sit the normal, like the O grade equivalent accountancy. We're going to demote her and get her to sit the lower exam. And I went, are you hell? You're not doing that at all. And Tony went on to excel in accountancy at Robert Gordon University and be the top student. And she passed her advanced higher easily and walked it. And yet they said at the time we wanted to demote her and let her sit the exam below. And do you know why that was? Because they weren't sure she would pass, and it would affect their gradings for their results.
For those reasons, isn't there?
For their KPIs, and I refused to do that. Ben and Scott were the same. They tried to demote Ben with computers, and yet Ben excelled and got his degree in computer and networking at Fife College. So again, if I had let that happen, and allowed that to happen, and allowed them and just believed what they said, Ben probably wouldn't have his degree now. He wouldn't have been accepted. So so as a parent, you need to understand that the school system is out for the school system, and to push your child through to accommodate to work for someone else. And I can't say it as plain as that, but that's the reality of it. They can't do anything else outside of that because it's a mass market system. It has to appeal to everybody, and the majority rules in that type of system. And people like me, who are the misfits, who don't fit into that system, are just rejected or pushed out. I often say, though, the misfits are usually the ones that go on to run their own businesses, and actually run businesses as well, because they're the people on the border. Dare I say, when you get people that fall off the rails and they go one way, and they end up, let's look at the criminal mastermind, for example. The criminal mastermind is probably the person, it could have been the utter genius, but they just got led down the wrong path.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's who I see it. These people have been led down the wrong path. They've not chosen that path really, because they didn't have all the facts to choose it, but nobody encouraged them to take the other path,
Mm-hmm.
the path of success. And that's why you get that sometimes get that crossover where the people that end up being the genius are actually the criminal mastermind.
It's true what you say there about the misfits. Sometimes they're just ignored, and actually the Diary of CEO that you speak about, I do watch those podcasts as well, and his name's escaping me at the moment, but the CEO of Perrie, he did exactly that. He did that exact same discussion, and he said when he was a child and he was growing up, he wasn't fit for anything, and he was trying to get into business, didn't really know how to do it, and everyone was saying, do it this way, follow us, and he said, excuse my French, but he was like, bugger that, I'm going to swim the other way. And he swam the other way because he thought, just because they're en masse going that way, I don't need to necessarily go that way. And he has become a hugely successful gentleman.
Yeah. Where's John Paul Getty once said, right? John Paul Getty at one point in time was the richest man in the world. I mean, I didn't agree with some of his morals and his ethics, but he was one of the richest men in the world at the time. He said that in order to be successful, you've got to observe the masses and do the opposite.
Mm-hmm.
If you just go the same way as the masses, you'll get the same result as the masses. If you want to work until you die, keep following the system it's running right now, because that's exactly what it's designed to do. No pensions, no healthcare, no nothing. That's what the system right now is happening. That will evolve into, we will not have enough people. We know, for example, the population, we'll all die off and retire soon. And the workforce will decline by about 30% because we don't have enough people born to replace us in that job. Therefore, they'll have to automate most of it. So, and I had the conversation yesterday with somebody talking about this on the bus. I overhear all these conversations. I felt like jumping in, saying that it's terrible, all this automation. And I felt like jumping in and saying, all right, okay, so how are you going to replace the 30% of the workforce that will retire or die soon, in the next 20 to 50 years? Because that's what we're facing right now. This system that we're operating right now will collapse. That's why they're having to automate all these things and make sure that's going. So again, it's about understanding why people are actually doing things. That they're not necessarily doing it for profit, although some people do that for profit. But generally, there's a real worry in the world itself as our generation will actually, not be replaced because you can't just suddenly appear with people out of thin air. This is why Scotland has taken the Scottish government has taken the attitude of, like, we need immigration, and we need immigration fast, and we want to be a part of Europe, and it's no political thing I'm doing here. We want to be a part of Europe because we need to have these people to come and work for us.
Yeah.
We don't, we're not wanting people to come and use the system and benefits. That's not what it does, and it very rarely happens. But we need people with skills to come and work for us. I was even talking to the doctors here in Jamaica and going, should come to the UK and work for us. I was doing a one-man promotion to get more people into the healthcare system from Jamaica. All the people that were treating me for my injuries and stuff like that. When the doctor saw me, I was promoting to him. When the nurse saw me, I was promoting to her and saying, you should come over to our country and actually work in our system. It's like, we need people like you here, and it pays a lot better, and it's a lot better lifestyle than what you've got. Believe me, it's a lot better lifestyle. The glitz and glamour you see here, the crime is huge here. So don't kid yourself by what you see on all the adverts in the background of where I'm sitting right here. You are told not to really wander off this complex and to stick to the buses. And if you're going anywhere, if you're wanting a car for the day, we'll send somebody with you. So you're actually told, if you're having a car for the day, someone else is from the place is actually going with you to go anywhere if you hire a car from us. Because it's not the fact we don't trust your driving, it's the fact that you could end up wandering in the wrong place. It is literally like that here. The crime rate's actually quite high. And why would you blame them? There's abject poverty here. If they see somebody that they've got an opportunity for survival, then why would you know? Why would they not take that advantage? Why would they not take that opportunity? It's the classic. The one I saw is, do you know the people that actually, when you're abroad and you've got the guys at the end of the road going, I've got your parking space, I've got your parking space. And then you think, I could just get a parking space for myself. And then you drive in and they put their hand out and they're wanting something from you. My sister actually put it quite straightforward to me when I said, that's ridiculous. She said, do you realise that they go home and actually feed their family with what they're giving you? And they have nothing. They have no job. They have no skills. They have no welfare. They have no healthcare system. They need anything they can get, and that's why they do that. And that's why they're not too proud to beg. You know, that's the reality. And you don't realise, because we come from a very wealthy system. No matter what you say, we're very, very well off in comparison to the rest of the world. You can sit and say, oh, but they've got it better and they've got it better. But I'll tell you what, on the face of it, you think they've got it better, but they've not got it as good as us. This is maybe great, all the glitz and glamour that you see behind me. But when you look down at the core of everything that you see outside of the UK, especially outside of Scotland, it's a completely different system. And it's a system that you would not want in Scotland, definitely. We're going the right way culturally, we're going the right way ethically. We're just going maybe a wee bit too far sometimes, but that's up to us to rein that in. That's why there's healthy debate going on right now in terms of the private rented sector, in terms of the housing sector. And that's why I've been constantly bombarding the social media all the time about this plight we're after. So to just recap on that, you know, the confusion about where I was going, what I was doing, and how did I fit in. This is what this was all about, and this is why I went off the rails in my high school years, because no one actually explained that to me. No one told me why I was there, what I was wanting, what I was to do. I used to worry about things like when my dad drove to my granddad's in Newport, right, my gran and granddad's, I used to worry when I was 6 years old and think, how am I going to be able to drive there? How am I going to know? It's like, is that normal? It's like for children to think that. I was like, that's how I was hardwired, because my dad ran his own business. He was independent and he did everything for himself, and he didn't rely on other people. So that's what I was brought up like. So I thought, that's what I've got to do. I never saw anything else outside of that.
Yeah.
So everything I approached it with was with that mindset. If it is to be, it's up to me, and I've got to solve it for myself.
That's a lot of responsibility to take on when you're a child, though, isn't it?
Of course it is. Of course it is. It's the pressure was immense, and you know that. You see that manifesting itself still now, in terms of how I am, and I have to shake that off now and again and just tell my chimp. My chimp's called Bubbles, by the way. I need to tell my chimp Bubbles to shut up now and again and just keep his opinion to himself until I work it out.
No, I do see that in you, and I think it's actually probably an appropriate moment to kind of do the wrap up on that. And you were talking about your experience in Jamaica just now, and it all seems to be about systems, isn't it?
Yeah. Processes, systems, making sure you understand yourself. More importantly, making sure you understand yourself, making sure you understand. This is that somebody out there loves you, right? If you understand that and have that at your face, that somebody out there loves you, you'll be content for the rest of your life. That's why people go to religion, by the way, because God always loves them regardless of what they do. Think about that. The inherent desire in humans to be loved and accepted overrides everything. Everything is geared towards that. Every decision they take is all about being loved and accepted. I'll challenge you to prove me otherwise, because it is fundamentally its core every single time to be loved and accepted. And that's why people do everything. And that's me.
I think that's a very convenient place to stop, actually, Jim, and very well put. Thank you very much for sharing part 2. Very much looking forward to part 3, the next part of the journey. If anybody has got any questions, would like some guidance, please feel free to just message us directly, and we're happy to help you along your way and point you in the direction of maybe some help if you're needing it as well.
Yeah, that's it from more than likely if I've been through it, so I can put you in the right direction.
Perfect. Well, until next time, everyone, that's us. Thank you, Jim, and we'll see you.
Bye-bye for now.
Take care. Bye-bye for now.
I'm off to get in the pool. Bye-bye.
Thanks.